Now it's time for the Hanging with Ron Johnson segment. This past weekend, the 3-2. Here we go. Well, now it's time for the Hanging with Ron Johnson segment. As I promised, Andrew Sendejo is joining us. And I was at the Vikings game this past weekend. And as you know, we do the pregame show. And I see Xavier Rhodes down there. And then I start to see pictures. And I end up realizing, like, I had walked right by because I got a chance to hug Xavier Rhodes as we're leaving the field. And I realized I walked right by Andrew Sendejo and I didn't say one word. And so I was like, you know what? Let me reach out to him. You never know with social media, but we got him join us from 2011 to 2019. This guy was a Minnesota Viking. For those that I play receiver, so he was a guy that I did not like because I was like, I would have loved to have been his teammate, but I would have hated to play against him because you had no idea how hard you were going to get hit or if like what was going to happen. And Andrew Sendejo was one of the safeties in the NFL that struck fear in a lot of teams. I actually had a tweet one time, and you might not know this, went viral because of your response. And so you might not remember this game, you may, but you guys were playing the Saints in the Dome, or not the Dome, sorry, US Bank. And Mike Thomas runs like a dragon, a slant, and then a flat route. And he absolutely just flattens Xavier Rhodes, I think is who it was. I don't know if you hit somebody later or something, but I just tweeted, and I didn't say anything besides, hey, this Michael Thomas thing, like he knew what he was doing. That was a blah, blah. And then like his fullback tried to come to his rescue, like, man, clearly you don't know football. And I'm like, well, clearly look at my bio. I play receiver in the NFL, so I know you don't just run into the DB following the flat route. Like you're supposed to just run your slant. He absolutely decapitated him. And then I think you commented or something like, yeah, it's funny when safeties do it, but when receivers do it, everybody act like it's okay. And so it blew up from there where everybody started commenting, current players, former players, and everybody was losing their minds. And in the end, Michael Thomas hasn't been right since then. It feels like he's just kind of like been hurt. Things have not gone his way. But for you in that situation, so I start there. When you see receivers take their shots at DBs, do you ever think like, man, if I get a shot, I'm taking my shot on this guy?
I think that about every receiver. I don't pick and choose, but yeah, I think as a receiver, you probably don't get many chances to maybe line up a DB, maybe on a crack block every now and then. So
no, never.
They definitely are thinking the same thing. And, for someone that kind of is more of a physical player, they're probably thinking, well, let's give this guy a taste of his own medicine and see how he likes it, kind of, getting hit in the side of the head. So I've always had the thought process of like, as soon as the ball is snapped, nobody is unprotected. Like we all are aware that there is a football play going on here, and it's your responsibility to keep your head on a swivel and protect yourself to a certain extent. Obviously, after the play or something from behind that you can't even see, that's flagrantly a dirty play. But for the most part, you should have awareness of where everyone's at, how the play is unfolding, and how you can protect yourself.
And for you, I don't know if you ever knew this, you might have, but there was a saying about Andrew Sendejo that, he's going to hit you and he might hit his own teammate. I don't think you ever heard your teammate say that, or maybe you have and you're shaking your head.
Yeah.
Like, what would go through your head when you would hear guys like, make jokes about that? Like, man, like he's going to hit somebody and it might be us.
Well, I think they appreciated it in a sense because they knew that I was playing as hard as I could and that I was at least a majority of the time going to hit the opponent. But I would get a lot of feedback from the D line that they're like, oh, we're going to put my back plate on this week. And especially my boy, Xavier Rhodes, I hit him multiple times. I have knocked him out of a game. We were just talking about it at dinner. Actually, his wife was giving me hell about it. That she was glad that we don't play on the same team anymore because we actually got to play again together in Indianapolis in 2021.
Oh yeah.
And she was kind of just joking, like, I'm just thankful that he doesn't have to worry about you like knocking him out anymore because nobody else knocked him out except for you. And so that was just part of it. But I think I was on target for a majority of them. But just sometimes when there's so many bodies there and people are twisting around, you know how it goes. Like you kind of
friendly fire.
You got to attack the pile and get everybody. The goal is to get the guy down, and if you're kind of there too, then that it just happens to go like that sometimes.
Wait, so you knocked Xavier Rhodes out? So what happened? Like, explain that play.
It was 2015 and we're playing the Chargers, and they threw this 9-ball to Keenan Allen, and I felt like I read it perfectly, and Keenan Allen made a hell of a grab. And like right when he caught it over the shoulder, he just like put his foot in the ground and stopped. And then me and Xavier just met right at the point right there. He almost did like a full scorpion, and then Keenan Allen just kind of walked into the end zone. It's very, very embarrassing, not only because we gave up a touchdown, I knocked out my own teammate. It was probably on a Sports Center top 10 or something like that, but I had a friend in the stands that play happened right in front of them, and so they happened to be snapping pictures. So I have this perfect photo in my phone of right when I make contact with Xavier, and his head is just like bent backwards.
Oh my goodness.
So I'll send it to him every now and then when I tell him that I miss him.
And so another moment that I see your video pop up a bunch, and it's more so again, you probably remember this. Golden Tate, they just showed this. Harrison Smith gets stiff-armed. Golden Tate like backpedals into the end zone, decides to do like a backflip. You catch him in the air and knock him out of bounds, but then you see Harrison Smith kind of looking around like, what just happened? And then you kind of get up like, wait, that's a touchdown? So like in those moments, like, do you guys go back to Harrison Smith like, dude, how'd you get stiff arm like that? But then also, do you watch the hit back like, man, I actually knocked this dude 5 yards out of bounds?
I think I was more upset that we lost in a walk-off touchdown in overtime in a game that you should have won. But that I did see that play surface. That play surfaces up in my algorithm every now and then, which is kind of hilarious. So I'll make comments on there and stuff, and people will say like, "Oh, wow, that's like actually you in that play." And I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." But yeah, whenever a guy like that somehow escapes two of your best players, Harrison and Xavier, and like skates down the sideline, you're kind of just in shock in the first place that he was, because they were like in 2-man over there, so they essentially had 2 guys on him, and he still somehow skated out. But that's what happens in this league when you're playing against really good players. And that was one of those plays that if I actually wouldn't have hustled to the ball, I wouldn't have even been in the frame and probably wouldn't have been a part of that play at all. But he started to kind of slow down right before the goal line. And I was thinking, maybe if I get one last kind of shot, I can maybe get the ball out or something like that. So some wishful thinking right there at the end. But
yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. Because when I saw the hit, like, I mean, we were covering the game at that point. I do the Vikings fan line on K-Fan Radio, so we always talk about that. And that's the one thing I know. I remember that a lot of fans call in, they're pissed off, they're drunk, and that's what everybody was talking about. Is like, how do you let that happen? How, like, he's not even that fast. And it's like, hey, he's good though. Like, it doesn't matter how fast he is. The dude is shifty. He runs good routes.
He was like, and you don't see a lot of. People don't see a lot of highlights that people do in games every single week. Like, right, they only pick the top 10 plays. Right. But when you watch film, there are so many plays that happen in the NFL every week that are qualified to be in the top 10. And some that just, they might not look flashy, but the players who know when they see it, they'll watch it and say like, dang, like that was a really good play by that guy. But you just don't see those on ESPN.
Yeah, you don't. And speaking of plays on ESPN, we all saw this. Trevor Lawrence, who now went to IR with a concussion, goes to slide, gets hit. Algier for the Houston Texans, and Tom Brady came out first, and he actually sided with the defensive players, which I don't think he would have done that when he played. But he sided with the defensive. I don't know. He sided with the defensive players and said that it's unfair that quarterbacks that are running. So if you have a Michael Vick, you take a Jalen Hurts, you look at a Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, guys that can move. They are a lot, and they slide for like, I mean, Kyler Murray this past weekend, they slide for like 10 yards. And so in order for a defensive player come in a split second, you have to decide, like, am I going to like let this guy just keep getting more yards, or am I going to try to make him go down as quick as possible? And then in that instance, it's like, I can't hit them high, so they go low, and then the player slides, and it's just boom, what happens? And now Algier hits, and you protect yourself. You don't want to just fall and let your body flail into a guy coming at you full speed. So it's a little bit of protection too. And now he's suspended. But Tom Brady came out saying it's unfair. Quarterbacks need to have to go head first or just pay the consequences of what happens, so on and so forth. When you hear stuff like that, like, because I know you understand it, you've been in it, but how hard is that? Like, a guy coming at you, you have to decide in a split second, am I going to hit this guy, or is this guy going to slide and I need to pull up and jump over him or something?
Always err on the side of hitting the guy. Like, we're playing football. Like, once you once you are out of the pocket and you're running, you are a runner. And this is going to sound crazy, but I almost feel like it's a selfish move on the quarterback's behalf to jeopardize himself and the entire team by just trying to get that extra yard and not just getting down early. I think it's a great look. Clearly, nobody wants to see anyone get hurt. Nobody likes that. We're all out there for the same reason, to win the game, to make plays, and to make money for our family, right? Like that. We're all out there doing the same thing. We're all kind of essentially under the same umbrella of the NFL. Even though we're playing against each other, we're still kind of all in this fraternity together. But there is some onus on the quarterback to, why would you jeopardize like getting that close on a second down, like, you know, in the game? Like, just get down. Let that be a lesson that if you're running, these quarterbacks can close extremely fast, and you might think you have time, but you don't have as much time as you think, and you need to get on the ground because there's guys out there like linebackers that will take your head off. And I mean, you could open a can of worms on this one because I can have a full dissertation on these things. But the other part is that we talked about the onus kind of being on the quarterback. Obviously, like as a defensive guy, I think as a defensive guy, and you can't jeopardize your career or giving up a first down by letting up because you thought he was going to slide, and now he runs for a first down, and now you look like an idiot.
True.
You get fired. You get whatever the case may be. You know, Tom Brady has come out and said kind of multiple things, like kind of almost defending defenses about how these quarterbacks are not held accountable for the penalties that occur on the defense. So now they can throw balls into coverage where they're not supposed to, get the guy's head taken off. It's on the defense. These quarterbacks can run up the sideline, step out the last second, fake slide, do all these things, and they get hit, and now it's on the defense. So there's a little bit there that I don't think you can go as far as like penalizing for a late slide. That seems a little egregious, but I guess the other part of this is that the NFL obviously has to make a statement. They have to set an example. And what we would always call these when I played, we called these violence fouls. If the play ended up with a violent result, the NFL has to do something. They cannot just let that go without giving that guy a severe penalty, right? Like imagine after all the media coverage, if they didn't suspend him for 3 games, people would be losing their minds, right? Because it's a dirty play and all that. But if Trevor Lawrence didn't hit his head on the ground, how do we know that he would have even got knocked out? Like, we're not even sure if that's what actually caused him to get knocked out or if it was the actual initial hit. A lot of times these hits, if your head hits the ground, that's what actually causes the concussion, because that is way harder than getting hit, you know, by a forearm or a shoulder pad. And so when a guy gets knocked out, the referee has no choice but to like throw the flag. They have to, right? If he would have popped back up, I think they still probably would have thrown a flag, but there's no suspension, there's no nothing, because it wasn't as violent. And also, I think what exacerbated the issue was that it was on their side, on the Jaguar sideline. If that play would have been on the Texans sideline, you would have had maybe like 2 guys over there. You might have had one guy from the Jag sideline like run all the way across the field, but it wouldn't have been as big of an issue. I think the 3-game suspension is insane. It doesn't match up with other suspensions that have occurred for guys kind of doing similar things. And I think ultimately both guys were just kind of caught in a bad situation where they're both trying to make a play and go as far and as hard as they can, which is kind of natural out there in the NFL.
Right. Because, when he got up, he didn't celebrate. I mean, some guys you can tell when they think they made a big hit and they didn't think anything wrong with it, they get up to celebrate. He jumped up right away like, oh, man, like I can't, and then he gets hit in the back of the head by Evan Ingram.
Yeah, he didn't even get time to like celebrate or not celebrate. As soon as he stood up, he got whacked in the back of the head.
Yeah, and so, so it is what it is when it comes to football. And you brought up a good point about, receivers and DBs and the hits now, and they're lowering the angle, and, Matthew Stafford calling Kirby Joseph dirty because he's taking out 2 tight ends by going at his knees. It's tough and tougher because it's like, do you want a concussion or do you want their knees? And I've actually talked to some tight ends, even Kyle Rudolph about this. He's like, man, I'd rather take the hit in the chest or the head. Like, don't hit my knees because I can't protect myself there. And so a lot of players have said that like, let them hit us in the shoulders and the head. Like, we can come back from that. Like a torn ACL, I can't come back from that. And so I don't know if the NFL will ever do it because, like, you're right, it looks violent on TV. Some of the sponsors don't like how that looks. The helmet people are talking about, my dad played for the Steelers and I still have his helmet over there. And that's his actual helmet. And the technology was terrible. And, he was a guy that was a hitter and had concussions. And he was, he played with Tony Dungy and Mel Blount and was in a coma, for a couple days after a big hit and blah, blah. And so their technology compared to today's technology, it's changed so much where I think people are forgetting that it's going to keep getting better, but guys are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so when you think about you as a player, do you ever go back and question? Because have you had a concussion playing?
Oh yeah.
Was it diagnosed right away, or was it one of those like you got your bell rung, you kept playing, and then later you realized like I had a concussion?
I never had I had one where there was like a bell rung. I came back and played, and then like after learning more and diving deeper into like concussions, I realized like, okay, that was a legit concussion. And even like after watching the tape of it, like I was out for a second. And then I've had some where I'm completely knocked out cold, laying on the field. Like we spoke about the Mike Thomas play in the Saints playoff game. And actually, my very last play of my NFL career, I got.
I was going to say, so wait, the Mike Thomas play, was that you or was that Xavier that got hit?
That was me. So Xavier.
So he hit you. Okay. All right.
Xavier was covering Mike Thomas on that dragon route, and he ran right into me. I was covering the guy to the flat.
So you got hit. Okay. So I was wondering how that. I could not remember how you were involved, but I remember it went viral because that was the whole thing, and and then I remember the fullback.
I think Xavier chirped in, and then the fullback used to be on the Vikings, Zach Line, and so I know Xavier. Like, I have this great picture of Xavier like getting held back by the teammates because he was like trying to fight Mike Thomas, and I'm in the background on the ground, concussed with all the training staff. So like that's after I didn't realize that happened, but afterwards I obviously I'm like you're my guy, man. Like got my back through all this. Through all this stuff, so we'll still talk about it
because you were covering Zach Line, right? Running the flat route, and Mike Thomas was running the slant.
Yeah, he had like a little 5-yard in ish, but even watching him, it's like it kind of, you can't really tell but like even him, it seems like he's kind of just like putting his hands up to like defend himself. He's so big, right? He just so happened to hit me right in the side of the head, which is, from my experiences, where pretty much all my concussions have occurred is getting hit kind of in the side of the head, which kind of makes you question the whole methodology on tackling of like putting your head to the side. You're kind of exposing these temporal areas. I've never had a concussion from hitting someone with what we call growing up the 2 screws. You just put your 2 screws on them and kind of with the forehead. But obviously, there's some places where you can't avoid putting your head in the game because it's the most furthest point of your body when you bend forward, and so there's times just it's easier to use your shoulder. Sometimes you happen to put your head in there. It's just football.
And when you look at again, just playing football, you play with some greats. You play with Harrison Smith. I mean, you can go back to Xavier Rhodes, Anthony Harris. I mean, he ended up being a really good safety as well, followed in your footsteps. And when you talk about a Hall of Famer like Harrison Smith, he's doing things that no other safety has done. He's putting himself in an echelon of like one of the greats, but he doesn't always get the credit. So like Antoine Winfield Jr., he's getting the credit for being one of the top paid safeties in the NFL, and he's doing this and this since his first couple of years and all. But Harrison Smith has quietly been an assassin for years, and nobody really talks about how great he's been. But when you think about playing with him, what are some of the things you learned from being his teammate?
He was just a really smart player, even in situations where the whole defense wasn't really sure what check we should get to. He was a guy that was just such a cerebral guy that he could put us all on the right check. Or if we kind of had to freestyle a little bit, we would figure it out. He wasn't a guy that got too high or too low. He wasn't, super rah in the huddle, but he also wasn't bitching in the huddle either. It's just even kilter the whole time. And just over the course of playing with him and and he would make plays in kind of clutch moments, you just you feel better when you're out there having another guy that is going to be in the right spot. It's not going to miss an assignment, and at any point in the game can make a big play. So just being around that guy, it makes you play with more confidence too, because it's like you're taking a test together and you have another really smart guy to help you take the test, so if you forget one of the answers, he's got it.
And when you think about, we're going to transition a little bit into the upcoming game. Vikings are playing the Falcons. This is going to air after the game, but just give an insight to people. So you've played with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins now moves on, not because of anybody besides money. That's what people are doing. This is a business. He had an opportunity to make more money somewhere else, so he took it. You'd be dumb not to. And so he moves on to the Falcons. He's now coming back to US Bank Stadium. As a player that's played with him and watched him and played against him, how much does that help a guy like Harrison Smith heading into this game, saying like, I know what this guy wants to do half the time. I know some of the ways he tries to look me off or some of the throws he wants to make. Is there anything that you, like if you were playing in this, that you could take from your time with him or Harrison Smith time with him to say, this is what we try to want to get out of him for this game?
Yeah, you kind of let the chess match begin, so to speak, because at the same time, he also knows how you operate. So he knows, Harrison's down, like he could blitz, he could be dropping to the half field, he could be dropping to the middle. And so it obviously helps a lot to be kind of familiar with them, what their capabilities are, the throws they can and can't make, their scrambling abilities, and things like that. So it does help a little bit, but at the same time, you have to realize they also know a lot about you. And so that'll be kind of a interesting little, like I said, kind of a chess match, like a game within the game. Obviously, as Harrison disguises a lot and is kind of all over the place, and that defense in general too. So, and I think anytime you go and play against your old team, like you naturally want to play well. It's like showing up in front of your ex-girlfriend with your new girlfriend. Like you're gonna try to look as good as you can. Like you're gonna try to show off. So it'll be, I anticipate him kind of having a little bit more juice, Kirk Cousins, for this game, and not wanting to embarrass himself in front of his ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, and so when you think about, I like that analogy.
Yeah.
When you think about, this upcoming game, and, again, Kirk Cousins, Sam Darnold, everybody's talking about the matchup now. The Vikings are 10-2. The Falcons are heading in a different direction. What is it about the Vikings organization? Because it seems like they're always like right here. You guys are always like 8 wins, 9 wins, and then 10 wins, 11, like you have those years. And then what has it been about the sustainability to kind of not ever be like that 1-win team, but then still like how it's hard to get over that hump to get past the NFC Championship and get to the Super Bowl? But what is it about? I mean, I know part of it is some of the guys have been around for a long time, but Harrison Smith being one of the longest. What is about that sustainability of this team, like the culture and what Minnesota's been about?
I think it's overlap of when you have guys from a really good season, and then when those guys stick around and then you have some new guys come in, they're able to kind of translate that culture and that kind of winning mentality and like, hey, this is how you win games. I was a part of these types of teams that done that. And then that carries over into the next kind of generation of Vikings. And then as they kind of get older and they're tenured and the new guys come in, that gets passed down. So you really has to start somewhere with some guys that have gone deep in the playoffs, have won, and know what it takes to win and play at a high level. They kind of permeates throughout to different guys, and then it just kind of keeps carrying over. So that's why you kind of see these kind of continual like good seasons, is because that culture is kind of getting passed down and passed down and passed down, and that's also why some organizations you see just a lot of losing. Like they haven't had any winning teams to kind of like show, hey, this is how you win games, this is what the culture is like, and to be able to pass that down. But it just kind of takes kind of that one team or season to kind of get that going, and then you can hopefully kind of pass that down through the generation, so to speak, of new players coming into the organization.
And speaking of new players, there's gonna be players that retire, end up where you're at. Something you've been a part of now, and you're the CEO, BrainTree. Explain to the people a little bit about what you're trying to do with brain health and wellness. Because I know when it comes to football, concussions, so on and so forth, like my dad's brain, when he passed away, we had it donated because we wanted to know. Half the stuff that was going on with him. And he was high functioning, never would know, like he had moments of depression, but we didn't really know the extent of it because he played in the 70s and 80s, so it was well before like anybody cared about health and wellness and brain stuff. And football men had to be men. You had to be warriors. You couldn't be vulnerable. You couldn't, open up to your wife or your girlfriend. Like you had to be this tough guy. And so now you're into this space of health and wellness. Explain that a little bit before we get out of here.
Yeah. So, in my 12 years in the most violent sport in the world, at the end of my career, I still could not find effectively dosed, banned substance-free products to help support cognitive health. So one of my college teammates and myself, we hired his mom, who is a neurologist, on our medical advisory board to formulate a line of pharmaceutical grade products that are designed to enhance, preserve, and protect cognitive health. I was kind of always the locker room supplement nutrition guy. So I was always the guy kind of making sure guys weren't taking banned substances or kind of messing with them about all the junk food they would eat. And I was kind of like the supplement guy in the locker room. And so it was a space that I was already kind of familiar with and knew a lot about, but then just at the end of my career, I just didn't have anything really for myself or my teammates. And so we launched BrainTree Nutrition. I've been working on that ever since. And so there's kind of this interesting dichotomy of like the make football violent again guy and like the brain health guy. And obviously I was a physical player. That was my MO. I sustained my own concussions and TBIs and injuries. And so that's how I've been able to sort of restore my own cognitive health after having a kind of a career-ending concussion that was really gruesome, and being able to help improve these areas that people are relying on prescription medications for. So trying to give people natural, more holistic alternatives to focus, memory, neuroprotection, stress and anxiety, sleep, hydration, kind of these foundational areas of cognitive health that if you can't handle with sleep, diet, exercise, that's where supplements like BrainTree Nutrition come in to help supplement those areas and just kind of give you some nutrition that you might not be able to get from food or get naturally.
Yeah, and I think people don't understand how important brain health is. It's just one of those things where you just assume it's just like, I'm good. God's going to take care of me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And it's like, yeah, but you need to be a little bit more focused on it, whether it's conversation, whether it's mental health therapists. And then, like you said, if it's CBD, whatever it might be, but finding things, especially for players that play, because I know that's part of it, is there's so many substances they tell you are banned, but then they don't look at everything. So then all of a sudden the guy takes something, thinks it's fine. Trainers kind of say, hey, well, it's on you. We don't really know. He takes it. He tests positive because of a random test. Of course, somebody probably told on him, and you test positive.
Yeah. We know how it goes.
You test positive. Yeah. And then, and it's like, well, look, I asked and y'all told me it was okay. And because I had a teammate do that. Like we asked, he took it, and they still came back and got him. And they were like, well, we told you at your own risk, So it's like, well, maybe you research it. So I'm glad you're doing that, because when I looked at that too, I was like, oh man, this is cool, because I do talk to a lot of college players, because I do the Gophers pregame show as well. And that's one thing when I talk to college players about, I'm like, man, like don't underestimate how much you put into this sport and how much is taken from you. Because so many players just assume it's give. And it's like, no, it's taking too. Yeah. Like it is taking from you. So you need to do your own, put it back. Because once you're done, and this, once you're done, you're done. They do not care to like help you actively. You have to search, you have to seek, you have to go out. And oftentimes it goes without a response. And that's why I know, like I just talked to Pat Williams, he was at the game a while ago, and I was talking to him about that, about when he was done playing and how he was in his house a lot and didn't want to come out. And I'm like, yeah, that's just what football does to you. Like it puts you in a state of like a weird depression fog. That you feel like the world's against you and nobody cares. And, and that's just the enemy. That's just the devil trying to like creep in. And some players, we know this, players that played, some don't last. They want to end their own life, or they don't want to be around people. And I think, you and Xavier Rose, I'm like, man, that's key. Because I know for me, being back around sports, doing this stuff has kept me mentally active. Like it's kept me excited to be around the sport. Because when I first left, like I left because of injury, and I threw gear away and I threw hoodie. Like I didn't want anybody to know I played football. Like I'm done. And now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, when the Ravens send me stuff or teams send me stuff that I played for, I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Like I'll wear the hat, I'll wear this. And, and it's no shame in it anymore. But at first it was shame. It's like, man, I didn't make it for 15 years. I didn't make $100 million. Like, and I think that wears on you too.
It is definitely a weird transition, kind of going back into what I would call civilian life. But the game of football, it kind of induces so much stress and anxiety because there's so much uncertainty in football and the career of football. So even being in the NFL, if you're not a first round pick or a solidified star, there's uncertainty every day about your job. And then there's uncertainty every day about, like, is this day going to be a good practice or a bad practice, a good game or a bad game? We all go into the games, obviously, with like a positive mindset and trying to, make all the plays and things like that. But I always kind of say, like, brain health is mental health is brain health. If you aren't sleeping well and you can't remember things and you're stressed, all that is going to just compound. And that's what kind of actually gets on you when it comes to the mental health and depression. Anxiety rates are like out of the freaking roof right now. Continuing to trend in the wrong direction. So, like I said, we're just trying to give people access to products that can kind of help alleviate these areas as natural as we can with effectively dosed products. So just trying to do our part to help, like I always say too, during football, you have to, in order to maximize your career, you have to be extremely selfish. You have to be me all the time. I got to train. I got to do this. I got to watch film. Like, I don't have time for that. And so being done playing football, it's been very rewarding to kind of put my energy back into helping people. And it's almost like you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. And so this is kind of like my journey of taking care of others through a business of being able to try to help people out with their brain and mental health.